Picture this. It's Saturday night. Your phone buzzes with notifications, Instagram stories flood your screen, friends at parties, couples on romantic dates, groups laughing over dinner. Everyone seems to be living their best life. And there you are, sitting alone, scrolling through a highlight reel of happiness while feeling more isolated than ever. But here's the twist that's going to shatter everything you think you know about loneliness. The loneliest people in our society aren't the hermits living in cabins on remote mountains. They're not the elderly, forgotten in nursing homes, though their isolation is heartbreaking. No, the loneliest people are the ones surrounded by hundreds of friends, thousands of followers, and endless social connections. They're the influencers with millions of admirers who can't sleep at night because they feel completely misunderstood. They're the popular kids from high school who peaked early and now feel trapped in personas they created decades ago. They're the successful professionals who attend networking events every week but haven't had a meaningful conversation in months. This isn't just some poetic observation. It's a psychological phenomenon that's destroying the mental health of an entire generation. And tonight, we're going to explore why having more connections might actually be making us more alone than ever before. Because here's what nobody talks about. In a world where we're more connected than any generation in human history, we're experiencing an epidemic of loneliness so severe that researchers are calling it a public health crisis, equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But how is this possible? How can someone surrounded by people feel so utterly alone? The answer lies in understanding the difference between connection and true intimacy, between being known and being seen, between having friends and having authentic relationships. And let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was the kind of person everyone wanted to be around. In college, her dorm room was the gathering spot. Her phone never stopped buzzing with invitations. She had 847 friends on Facebook, 3,200 followers on Instagram, and her group chats were constantly active. Sarah was social media royalty before we even called it that. Every weekend was packed with plans. Every photo was perfectly curated. Every status update received dozens of likes and comments. From the outside, Sarah lived the life everyone envied, but here's what nobody saw. Every Sunday night, after the parties ended and the cameras stopped flashing, Sarah would sit in her bathroom at 2 a.m. crying into a towel so her roommate wouldn't hear. She felt like she was performing in a play where she'd forgotten her lines, surrounded by an audience that loved the character she portrayed but had no idea who she really was. Sarah realized she could disappear for weeks, and while people might notice her absence from parties, nobody would notice her absence from life. She had trained everyone around her to love a version of herself that she'd constructed for their entertainment. The real Sarah, the one who struggled with anxiety, who questioned her major, who sometimes felt overwhelmed by the pressure to always be on, that Sarah was invisible. The irony was suffocating. She was drowning in a sea of superficial connections while desperately searching for just one person who might throw her a lifeline of genuine understanding. Sarah's story isn't unique. In fact, it's becoming the norm. Dr. Vivek Murthy, the US Surgeon General, has declared loneliness a public health epidemic. But here's the kicker. The loneliest demographics aren't who you'd expect. Young adults aged 18 to 25, the most socially connected generation in history, report the highest levels of loneliness and social isolation. How did we get here? How did having more friends than ever before leave us feeling more alone than our grandparents who might have known only a dozen people their entire lives? The answer lies in what psychologists call the paradox of choice meets the performance of self. We have access to more people than ever, but we've lost the art of being vulnerable with any of them. Now, the human brain is wired for deep, meaningful connections, what anthropologists call our Dunbar number. Robin Dunbar, a British anthropologist, discovered that humans can only maintain about 150 meaningful relationships at any given time. But here's where it gets fascinating. Within that 150, only about 5 people can be truly intimate connections, and only about 15 can be close friends. Think about that for a moment. Your brain is literally designed for small, deep circles of trust, but social media has flipped this equation upside down. We now have access to thousands of shallow connections while neglecting the handful of deep ones our psyche actually craves. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman's research at UCLA reveals something profound. When we experience social rejection, the same areas of our brain light up as when we experience physical pain. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference between a broken bone and a broken heart. Social connection isn't just nice to have, it's a biological necessity like food and shelter. But here's where the modern world gets twisted. We've confused connection with contact, intimacy with interaction, being known with being seen. Ancient Stoic philosophers understood this distinction thousands of years ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations how much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself. The Stoics recognized that when we become obsessed with external validation and comparison, we lose touch with our authentic selves. Eastern philosophy goes even deeper. Buddhist teachings describe what they call spiritual materialism, the tendency to collect spiritual experiences, relationships, and achievements as a way to build up the ego rather than truly connecting with life. In our modern context, we collect friends and followers the same way ancient people might have collected golden idols. Dr. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability reveals the core issue. Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. Notice she doesn't say when they have a lot of people around them. She says when they feel seen, heard, and valued. The loneliest people are surrounded by friends because they've become masters at being likable rather than authentic. They've optimized for quantity over quality, for impression management over genuine expression. Psychologist Dr. Carl Jung warned about this exact phenomenon nearly a century ago. He called it the persona, the mask we wear in social situations that eventually become so convincing that we forget who we really are underneath it. Jung believed that the greatest tragedy of human existence was people who lived their entire lives without ever meeting themselves. And here's where it gets really interesting. Modern neuroscience has discovered that when we're constantly performing for others, when we're always on and managing our image, our brains never get to enter what researchers call default mode network, the state where we process experiences, integrate memories, and develop our sense of self. Social media has created a generation of people who are always on, always performing, always curating. Their brains literally don't have time to figure out who they are when nobody's watching. Dr. Sherry Turkle from MIT has spent decades studying technology's impact on relationships. Her research reveals a disturbing trend. Young people increasingly prefer texting to talking, posting to conversing, and broadcasting to connecting. We're developing what she calls intimacy problems. We want the benefits of close relationships without the vulnerability they require. The result? We end up surrounded by people who know our favorite restaurant, our job title, our relationship status, and our travel destinations, but who have no idea what keeps us awake at 3 a.m., what our greatest fears are, or what we dream about when we allow ourselves to be honest. But what happens when someone breaks free from this pattern? What happens when someone chooses depth over breadth, authenticity over approval, real connection over social collection? Let me paint you two different pictures. Picture 1. Meet Jessica, the social butterfly. She has plans every night of the week. Her calendar is color-coded with different friend groups. She knows exactly which version of herself to present to which audience. Jessica can walk into any room and immediately identify who to talk to, what to say, and how to be charming. She's developed social skills like a superpower. But Jessica lies awake at night wondering if anyone would miss the real her if she disappeared. She feels like a chameleon who's changed colors so many times she's forgotten her original shade. When she tries to be vulnerable, she doesn't even know where to start because she's spent so long hiding her true thoughts and feelings. Picture 2. Meet David, who has exactly 3 close friends. He rarely posts on social media. He turns down party invitations regularly. From the outside, David might seem antisocial or boring. His phone doesn't constantly buzz with notifications, but here's what David has that Jessica doesn't. When David calls his 3 friends at 2 in the morning with a crisis, they answer. When David shares his struggles, his friends don't offer platitudes, they offer presence. David knows, without a doubt, that these 3 people have seen him at his worst and chosen to love him anyway. David sleeps better than Jessica. He makes decisions faster because he's not constantly worried about what others will think. He experiences less anxiety because he's not maintaining multiple versions of himself. He feels more alive because he's not performing life, he's living it. The research backs this up. Harvard's grant study, the longest-running study on happiness in human history, followed subjects for over 80 years. Their conclusion? The quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives more than money, fame, career success, or social status. But here's the twist. The study found that having one person who truly knows you is worth more than having 100 people who sort of know you. Dr. Robin Dunbar's research goes even further. He discovered that our closest relationships, what he calls our inner circle of 3 to 5 people, require about 60% of our social time and energy to maintain properly. This means if you're spreading your social energy across dozens of casual friendships, you literally don't have enough left to build the deep connections your soul craves. Think about it this way. Friendship is like a bank account. Surface-level interactions are like small change. You can have thousands of pennies, but they'll never add up to the value of a few genuine $20 bills. Most people are collecting pennies while wondering why they feel poor. The loneliest people are surrounded by friends because they've become addicted to the dopamine hit of surface-level validation while starving their need for genuine intimacy. They've confused being popular with being loved, being known about with being truly known. But here's where it gets even more interesting. When you choose depth over breadth, something magical happens. Your capacity for joy increases. Your tolerance for drama decreases. Your ability to be present improves because you're not constantly managing multiple relationships. You stop feeling FOMO because you know exactly where you belong. People who prioritize a few deep relationships report higher levels of life satisfaction, better mental health, lower anxiety, and a stronger sense of identity. They sleep better, make better decisions, and experience what psychologists call secure attachment. The feeling that they matter to someone, that their absence would be felt, that their presence adds value to the world. Actionable lessons. So how do you break free from the trap of surface-level social collection? How do you move from being surrounded by friends to being truly connected to people who matter? All right, let's dive into the 5-circle audit. First, take an honest inventory of your relationships. Go ahead and draw 5 concentric circles on a piece of paper. In the center circle, jot down the names of people who have seen you at your absolute worst and still choose to be in your life. These are the folks you could call at 3 in the morning with a genuine emergency, and they would answer without hesitation. Now, in the second circle, write the names of people you can be mostly authentic with, those who know your struggles, your dreams, and your true personality. These are friends you don't need to perform for. Moving on to the third circle, put your regular social connections, your people you enjoy spending time with, but who don't know your deeper self. In the fourth circle, place acquaintances and casual friends. Finally, in the fifth circle, put everyone else, social media connections, work colleagues you're friendly with, and people you know but rarely interact with meaningfully. Now here's the revelation. If your inner 2 circles have fewer than 10 people combined, you're normal and healthy. If they have more than 15, you might be spreading yourself too thin to go deep with anyone. And if they have fewer than 3 total, you've identified why you feel lonely despite being social. Now let's talk about the vulnerability challenge. Starting this week, practice what Dr. Brené Brown calls graduated vulnerability. Instead of trying to be likable in every conversation, try being real in 1 conversation per day. Share something slightly uncomfortable. Admit when you don't know something. Talk about a struggle you're facing. Express an unpopular opinion. Ask for help with something meaningful, and then watch what happens. Some people will step back, and that's actually good information. They were connected to your persona, not your person. But others will step closer. They'll share their own struggles. They'll offer genuine support. These are your people. All right, moving on to the social media detox. For the next 30 days, change how you engage with social media. Instead of posting highlights and curated moments, share something real once a week. Instead of scrolling passively, comment meaningfully on posts from people you actually care about. Better yet, when you see a post from someone you miss, don't just hit like. Send them a private message. Suggest meeting in person. Social media should be a tool for arranging real-world connections, not a replacement for them. Finally, we have the Deep Conversation Starter Kit. Learn to ask better questions. Instead of "How was your weekend?" try, "What's something you're struggling with right now?" Instead of "How's work?" ask, "What's bringing you joy lately?" Instead of "You look great," say, "You seem really peaceful lately. What's been different?" These questions signal that you're interested in the person behind the performance. Most people are starving for someone to ask about their inner world, not just their external accomplishments. The energy investment strategy: start saying no to social events that drain you, so you can say yes to relationships that truly fulfill you. If you're constantly running from party to party, dinner to dinner, event to event, you never really have time to go deep with anyone. Warren Buffett's approach to relationships actually mirrors his investment strategy. Concentrate your bets on a few high-quality opportunities rather than, diversifying across hundreds of mediocre ones. Choose 5 to 7 people you want to invest in this year. Make them a priority. Schedule regular one-on-one time. Remember what they tell you. Follow up on their struggles and celebrations. Be present when you're with them. Phone away, attention focused. The authenticity practice. Every day, practice showing up as your real self in just one interaction. This doesn't mean oversharing or being inappropriate. It means being honest about who you are, instead of performing who you think others want you to be. Wear clothes that feel like you, not just what's trendy. Express opinions you actually hold, not simply what's popular. Share struggles you're facing, not just successes you've achieved. Celebrate others authentically, not strategically. The loneliness reframe. When you feel lonely, resist the urge to collect more social interactions. Instead, go deeper with someone you already know. Call one friend and have a real conversation. Write a heartfelt text to someone you care about. Show up for someone else who might be struggling. Loneliness isn't solved by more people, it's solved by more meaningful connection with the right people. The science behind surface-level connections. Let's dive deeper into why our brains are wired this way, because honestly, understanding the neuroscience behind loneliness will change how you think about relationships forever. Dr. John Cacioppo, who spent his career studying loneliness at the University of Chicago, discovered something remarkable. Loneliness isn't about being alone, it's about feeling disconnected from others while in their presence. His brain scans revealed that lonely people's brains show hypervigilance to social threats, making them more likely to interpret neutral social cues as rejection or criticism. This creates a vicious cycle. The lonelier someone feels, the more they focus on potential social threats, which makes them less likely to be vulnerable and authentic, which in turn prevents them from forming the deep connections that would actually cure their loneliness. But here's where it gets really interesting. Cacioppo found that people surrounded by large social networks were actually more prone to this hypervigilance than people with smaller, closer circles. Why? Because managing multiple relationships requires constant social monitoring, evaluation, and performance management. Think about it. If you have 200 Facebook friends, you're subconsciously tracking 200 different relationships, 200 different expectations, 200 different versions of yourself. Your brain is working overtime to maintain all these social connections, leaving little energy for the vulnerable authenticity that creates real intimacy. Dr. Susan Pinker's research on social connections and longevity found that face-to-face interaction releases a cocktail of neurotransmitters including oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin, the same chemicals released during physical affection. But virtual interactions, even video calls, don't trigger the same neurochemical response. This explains why you can spend hours chatting with friends online and still feel emotionally empty. Your brain literally isn't getting the chemical rewards it evolved to receive from real human connection. The comparison trap. Social psychologist Leon Festinger's social comparison theory explains another piece of the puzzle. Humans naturally evaluate themselves relative to others as a way to gauge their own abilities and worth. This was adaptive when we lived in small tribes where everyone knew everyone's full story, but social media has weaponized this natural tendency. We're now comparing our inner reality, our struggles, insecurities, and mundane moments with everyone else's highlight reel, and we're doing it hundreds of times per day. Instagram doesn't show you your friend crying in their car after work. LinkedIn doesn't reveal the anxiety attacks behind the career updates. Facebook doesn't broadcast the relationship problems behind the anniversary posts. So we're trapped in a cycle where we feel inadequate compared to curated versions of other people's lives, which makes us curate our own lives more heavily, which honestly contributes to the collective performance that makes everyone feel more alone. The evolutionary mismatch. Anthropologist Sarah Hrdy's research reveals that humans evolved in small bands of 25 to 50 individuals where everyone knew everyone else's complete story, their strengths, weaknesses, family history, and daily struggles. Intimacy wasn't a choice, it was a survival necessity. Our brains are still wired for this level of transparency and interdependence. When we spread ourselves across hundreds of shallow connections, we're literally fighting against millions of years of evolutionary programming that screams, "But where are your people? Where is your tribe? Who really knows you?" This evolutionary mismatch explains why introverts often report feeling less lonely than extroverts, despite having fewer social connections. Introverts naturally gravitate toward the deeper connections our brains crave, while extroverts can get trapped in the endless cycle of surface-level social energy without ever satisfying their deeper need for intimacy. The philosophy of authentic connection. The ancient Greeks had 4 different words for love, understanding something we've kind of forgotten. Not all connections are created equal. Eros was passionate love. Storge was familial love. Agape was universal compassion, but philia, deep friendship based on shared values and mutual understanding, was considered the highest form of human connection. Aristotle believed that true friendship required 3 elements: utility, which means you help each other; pleasure, meaning you enjoy each other's company; and virtue, where you make each other better people. Most modern friendships stop at the first 2 levels. We hang out because it's fun and convenient, but we rarely challenge each other to grow or see the best and worst in each other. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. To make room for authentic relationships, you must end your addiction to superficial ones." This doesn't mean being cruel or cutting people off, but it means being intentional about where you invest your finite social energy. Zen Buddhism teaches the concept of beginner's mind, approaching each interaction with fresh curiosity rather than assumptions. Most people in large social circles stop being curious about their friends because they think they already know them. But humans are constantly changing, evolving, and revealing new layers of themselves. When was the last time you asked a longtime friend a question you'd never asked before? When did you last discover something surprising about someone you've known for years? If you can't remember, you might be relating to their past self rather than their present reality. Here's something that will blow your mind. The deeper your connections become, the less you need external validation. People with strong, intimate relationships report caring less about what strangers think, feeling less FOMO, and experiencing fewer social anxieties. Why? Because when you know you matter deeply to a few people, the opinions of the masses lose their power over you. You stop performing because you have audiences who love the unperformed version of yourself. Dr. John Gottman's research on relationships reveals that successful long-term bonds are built on what he calls emotional bidding, small moments throughout the day where partners acknowledge each other's attempts at connection. The magic isn't in grand gestures. It's in consistent small acts of attention and care. Apply this to friendship. The deepest connections aren't built through exciting adventures or impressive experiences. They're built through showing up consistently, remembering what matters to someone, and being present during both celebrations and struggles. Let's talk about what you're really paying when you choose breadth over depth in relationships. Dr. Roy Baumeister's research on ego depletion shows that self-control and performance management are finite resources. Every time you adjust your personality for a different audience, every time you craft the perfect response, every time you manage your image, you're depleting mental energy that could be used for creativity, problem-solving, or genuine enjoyment. People with large social circles often report feeling exhausted after social events, even fun ones. That's because they've spent the evening managing multiple versions of themselves rather than simply being themselves. When you're constantly shape-shifting to fit different social contexts, you can lose touch with your core identity. Psychologists call this identity diffusion, the inability to maintain a stable sense of self across different situations. Sarah from our earlier story represents millions of young adults who've become so skilled at reading rooms and adapting their personalities that they've lost access to their authentic preferences, opinions, and desires. Perhaps most tragically, people who perform for large audiences often report feeling emotionally numb. They become so practiced at managing their reactions for social consumption that they lose touch with their genuine emotional responses. They're not sure if they actually enjoyed the party or if they just performed enjoyment convincingly. They can't tell if they're genuinely happy or just good at appearing happy. They've confused the performance of emotions with the experience of emotions. Maintaining a large social circle requires constant relationship maintenance that becomes increasingly impossible as responsibilities grow. People report anxiety about remembering everyone's birthdays, keeping up with everyone's news, and maintaining consistent contact across dozens of relationships. This social anxiety is often mistaken for social skills problems, but it's actually a natural response to an unnatural situation. Your brain is trying to tell you that you're spread too thin. But here's where the story gets beautiful. When you choose authenticity over approval, when you choose depth over breadth, when you choose being real over being liked, everything changes. There's a specific type of relief that comes when someone knows your worst traits and chooses to love you anyway. It's the relief of putting down a heavy mask you didn't realize you were wearing. It's the exhale that comes from being seen and accepted, rather than admired and evaluated. People with deep friendships report something beautiful. They feel more like themselves when they're with their closest friends than when they're alone. The relationship doesn't diminish their individuality, it amplifies it. Unlike social media followers, real relationships get better with time. Every shared experience, every vulnerable conversation, every moment of showing up for each other builds compound interest in the relationship. After years of authentic friendship, you develop what psychologists call relational wealth. Inside jokes, shared memories, mutual understanding, and trust that can't be replicated or replaced. This is why losing a deep friendship hurts so much more than losing followers. But it's also why having deep friendships provides security that shallow connections never can. Here's something unexpected. When you model authentic relationship, you give others permission to do the same. Your vulnerability encourages others to be vulnerable. Your authenticity makes others feel safe to be authentic. Many people are trapped in surface-level connections, not because they prefer them, but because they don't know how to go deeper. When you show them what's possible, you become a catalyst for deeper connections throughout your entire social circle. The practical transformation. Let's get specific about how to make this shift, because, well, knowing the theory isn't enough. You need a roadmap for changing your social life. Week 1 to 2. The honest assessment. Spend these 2 weeks honestly observing your social interactions without trying to change them. Notice when you're performing versus when you're being authentic. Notice which relationships energize you and which ones drain you. Notice when you feel seen versus when you feel evaluated. Keep a simple journal. Today I felt most like myself when, and today I felt most like I was performing when. Week 3 to 4. The gentle pruning. Start saying no to social commitments that feel obligatory rather than nourishing. This doesn't mean being rude or cutting people off, but it means being more selective about where you invest your time and energy. If you typically say yes to every invitation, start saying yes to only half. Use the freed up time to go deeper with the relationships you want to invest in. Week 5 to 6, the vulnerability experiments. With 2 or 3 people in your inner circles, start sharing something slightly more real each week. Instead of "I'm fine," try "I'm actually struggling with something." Instead of "everything's great," share "I've been thinking about this challenge lately." Start small. You're not trying to trauma dump on people. You're trying to let them see slightly more of your real self each week. So during weeks 7 and 8, it's time for the deep dive conversations. You'll want to schedule some one-on-one time with the people you really want to connect with on a deeper level, and don't be afraid to ask questions you've never asked before, like, what's something you've never told me about yourself? Or maybe, what's a dream you've never shared with anyone? You could even ask, what's been the hardest part of this year for you? The important thing here is to listen. Truly listen, without trying to fix things, give advice, or, relate everything back to your own experience. Just be present with their reality. Moving into weeks 9 and 10, it's all about authenticity integration. This is when you start showing up as your real self in group settings. Try expressing your actual opinions, respectfully of course, and share your genuine reactions. It's time to stop managing your image and start being yourself. Some people might be a bit surprised by this change, and well, some might not like it, but that's perfectly okay. You're really just filtering for the people who want to know the real you, not just the version you perform for others. Week 11 to 12, the maintenance practice. It's time to develop rituals for maintaining your important relationships. Try sending one meaningful text per week to someone you care about. And schedule monthly one-on-one time with your closest friends. Make an effort to remember and follow up on things they've shared with you. Quality relationships really do require intentional maintenance, just like physical health or career success. You can't accidentally maintain deep friendships while putting most of your energy into managing a large social network. Breaking the social media illusion, let's address the elephant in the room. Social media has fundamentally changed how we think about relationships, and not for the better. Dr. Larry Rosen's research on eye disorder reveals that heavy social media use rewires our brains to crave constant validation and stimulation. We become addicted to the dopamine hit of likes, comments, and shares, which creates a tolerance effect. We need more and more external validation to feel the same level of satisfaction. This addiction to external validation makes authentic relationships terrifying because real friends aren't constantly applauding your existence. Real friends challenge you, disagree with you, and love you even when you're not impressive. The highlight reel versus reality. Social media shows us everyone's trailer, never their full movie. We see the vacation photos, not the credit card debt they created. We see the relationship anniversary posts, not the arguments from the night before. We see the career achievements, not the anxiety attacks in parking lots. This creates what psychologists call compare and despair, the tendency to measure our real, unfiltered lives against everyone else's carefully curated presentations. But here's the truth that might change everything. The people posting the most perfect content are often the ones struggling the most with authentic connection. The more someone needs external validation, the less likely they are to be vulnerable enough for real intimacy. The attention economy versus the intimacy economy. Social media operates on an attention economy. The goal is to capture and hold as much attention as possible, but relationships operate on an intimacy economy. The goal is to share authentic parts of yourself and receive the same in return. These two economies are fundamentally incompatible. Attention-seeking behavior repels intimacy. Performance prevents authenticity. The very skills that make you successful on social media, being constantly entertaining, always positive, carefully curated, are the exact behaviors that prevent deep friendship. The cultural shift we're experiencing is honestly pretty staggering. We're living through the largest social experiment in human history. The first generation to grow up with digital connection as the primary form of relationship building. And well, the results are it's not working. Dr. Jean Twenge's research on Generation Z reveals unprecedented levels of depression, anxiety, and loneliness despite, unprecedented levels of social connectivity. Young adults today have more friends, more social options, and more ways to connect than any generation before them, yet they report feeling more isolated and misunderstood than previous generations who had far fewer social opportunities. This isn't a technology problem, it's a values problem. We've prioritized connection quantity over connection quality, social reach over social depth, being impressive over being known. The return to tribal wisdom, in a way, offers some answers. Indigenous cultures around the world have practices that modern society has abandoned. They have rituals for deep sharing, ceremonies for community bonding, and social structures that prioritize elder wisdom and intergenerational connection. Many indigenous languages don't even have a word for loneliness because their social structures make it nearly impossible to be unknown by your community. Everyone has a role, everyone's story matters, and everyone's presence is essential to the group's well-being. We can't return to tribal living, but honestly, we can learn from tribal wisdom. Small circles of deep connection are more satisfying than large networks of shallow acquaintance. The minimalism movement for relationships is, I think, a really intriguing idea. Just as people are discovering that owning fewer better things creates more satisfaction than owning lots of cheap stuff, we need a minimalism movement for relationships. What if, instead of trying to maintain hundreds of social connections, you focused on cultivating 10 meaningful ones? What if, instead of going to every party you're invited to, you showed up fully present to fewer gatherings? What if, instead of being a little bit friends with everyone, you became a lot friends with a few people? The ripple effects of deep connection honestly go far beyond what you might expect. When you shift from collecting friends to cultivating relationships, the impact extends far beyond your social life. People with strong personal relationships perform better at work because they have emotional support systems that help them handle stress, perspective that keeps work problems in proportion, and genuine confidence that doesn't depend on professional validation. They're also more likely to take creative risks because their sense of worth isn't entirely tied to career success. When you know you matter to people regardless of your achievements, you're free to pursue meaningful work rather than just impressive work. The research is overwhelming. People with close friendships experience lower rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. But here's the specific finding that matters. It's not the number of friends that provides protection, it's the quality of support they provide. Having one friend who truly understands your struggles is more protective for mental health than having 10 friends who think you're always fine. Dr. Robert Waldinger's continuation of the Harvard study of adult development reveals that people with strong relationships live longer, have stronger immune systems, and experience less cognitive decline as they age. But again, the key factor isn't social activity level, it's relationship satisfaction. People who feel known and valued by others have lower inflammation markers, better sleep quality, and reduced stress hormones. Deep relationships provide what psychologists call secure base behavior. When you feel emotionally secure, you're more willing to explore new ideas, take intellectual risks, and express creative thoughts. People with strong friendships report feeling more creative, more curious, and more willing to try new things because they have a safe emotional base to return to if their experiments fail. So let's come back to where we started, but with new eyes. The loneliest people are surrounded by the most friends because they've confused being popular with being loved, being known about with being truly known, having company with having connection. They're performing life instead of living it, collecting people instead of connecting with them, managing relationships instead of experiencing them. But here's the truth that can set you free. You don't need more friends, you need better friendships. You don't need more connections, you need deeper connections. You don't need to be more likable. You need to be more real. The path out of loneliness doesn't lead through crowded rooms and packed social calendars. It leads through the courage to be vulnerable with a few people who matter, the wisdom to invest deeply rather than broadly, and the strength to choose authenticity over approval. Tonight, when you put down your phone and look around your life, ask yourself this question. Who really knows me? Not the version of me I present to the world, not the highlights and achievements, but the real me, the one who struggles and dreams and fears and hopes. If that list is short, don't panic. Most people's lists are short, but that short list is where your real life lives. Those are the relationships worth investing in, worth protecting, worth prioritizing above all the noise of social obligation and digital connection. Because here's the secret that lonely people surrounded by friends haven't learned yet. It's better to matter deeply to a few people than to matter superficially to many. It's better to be authentically known by 3 people than to be performatively liked by 300. The loneliest people are surrounded by the most friends, but the happiest people are surrounded by the truest ones. Your assignment, should you choose to accept it, isn't to make more friends. It's to unmask yourself with the friends you already have. It's to stop performing and start being. It's to choose the terrifying, beautiful work of being known over the exhausting, endless work of being liked. Because at the end of your life, when you look back on the relationships that mattered, you won't remember the parties where you were the most popular. You'll remember the conversations where you were the most real. You won't remember the friends who made you feel impressive. You'll remember the friends who made you feel understood. The cure for loneliness isn't out there in the crowd. It's right here in the courage to let a few people see who you really are when nobody else is watching. Stop collecting friends. Start connecting with humans. Your loneliness isn't a problem to be solved with more people. It's a signal pointing you toward the deeper connection your soul has been craving all along. The question isn't, how can I make more friends? The question is, who am I when I'm not performing? And who in my life is brave enough to love that person? That's where your real life begins.